So we had an introduction to this morning. We talked about 5 things we need to do if we're going to be twice as safe by 2020. Believe it's possible, understand human factors, understand behavior, get really proactive, and the 5th piece was understand why we take risks. Why did Nick do that so many years ago? Why do these various things happen in our workplaces? And this is a question that bothered me personally, and I think safety professionals across the country and around the world for the last couple of decades, answering that question, why do workers take risks? Why do I take risks? What do I do about it? And working for a company like ExxonMobil and Imperial, we actually had the opportunity to say we want to research this and put some research into it. So what I'm going to talk about today is the results of that research, give you the insights into risk tolerance, and we're going to talk about the 10 influencing factors. Now in front of you on the table, there's 2 sheets. One is a summary of the 10 influencing factors for risk tolerance, and the other one that looks very similar, you'll notice there's some blanks on it. That one is going to be your personal action plan when you leave here today. And as we go through each of these 10 influencing factors, I want you thinking about a workplace situation where that factor applies, or even a personal situation. And then make a note about a commitment you're going to do to address that one. So that's your personal action plan. What is risk tolerance? It's what goes on in our head. We weigh a number of factors, our background, our upbringing, lessons we've learned, our training, our knowledge, our skill, and then we make a decision whether a job is acceptable or not. And we looked at these ones this morning. This worker made the assessment that this would be safe, and he'd go ahead with that. This worker places himself between 2 pieces of mobile equipment and somehow thinks it's safe. Now, even if he understood that the equipment would move, is he overestimating his capability? Maybe he thinks he would be able to jump out of the way if they moved, or strong enough to push them apart. And we talked about the 12 workers on that beam, the group dynamics of risk. So that's what we're going to explore here. So this research, I started the research myself, and I'm just a safety guy, not a researcher. And I bogged down in it because this is all about psychology and the cognitive sciences. And then I discovered in ExxonMobil, we had this secret society down in Houston. This team of 7 people locked away in this secret room, a behavioral psychologist, a cognitive scientist, and a bunch of other brilliant people. So they set me up with this group to explore this concept of risk tolerance. We looked at information from NASA, the airline industry, experts around the world, and we got a lot of good information from recreational, people who are studying risk in recreational environments. And we explore those type of things, see, okay, what can we do about it? We talked about this one this morning. Why would somebody do that? Fast enough to get their hand out, maybe that's it. Or one like this, same thing, one person's holding the hammer. What kind of discussions go on? This worker in the middle, what he's doing, he's undoing a fitting on a truck, and on board that truck is water at 96 degrees Celsius. How hot does water have to be to burn you? 66 degrees. 3 seconds contact with 66 degree water is 2nd degree burns. 6 seconds contact is 3rd degree burns. That means 3 layers of skin burnt off, and he's undoing that fitting right there. Does that make you squirm? So what was he thinking when he did that? So that's what we're looking at with these 10 factors. We introduced you to this model. I should actually test somebody in the room here to explain it. 3 parts to it. We need to be able to see the hazard recognition. If we don't see it, we're engaged in at-risk behavior. I need to be able to understand the hazard, the perception of the risk. If I don't understand it, I'm down there. And then with that information, I make a decision. The really important thing with this model and with the research we were doing is we discovered that these are 3 independent processes that happen in our brain. And for decades in safety, we've been treating it as one process. And we would label it, the issue, as hazard recognition and risk tolerance. And we believed if we gave people more hazard recognition training, risk acceptance would go down. And we kept giving more and more hazard recognition training, and the acceptance of risk wasn't going around. And in companies like Imperial, it sounded like one concept. We used to refer to it as hazard recognition, risk tolerance. Just like one word. And the hazard recognition kept doing the training. Why didn't it work? So right in the middle of this research, I have my personal epiphany. And who was it this morning who described the light coming down and the angels singing? So I had a moment like that when we're doing this, this research, and it happened in a recreational activity that I engage in. When I wasn't practicing safety for Imperial, I love going snowshoeing. I love going in the mountains. I like going alone, and I like going above the tree line and into the backcountry. Now, people I work with said, Dave, you seem to take a lot of risk. Now, for the safety people in the room, that's a bit of an insult, isn't it? When somebody calls a safety person a risk taker. So I was a bit offended by it. But then when my family started saying this, you take risks back there. So what I did is just like we would do at Imperial, or just like you would do at Inter4 and Gorman and Can4, went and got myself some really good hazard recognition training. And I got it through the University of Calgary. And the thing that amazed me about the training they did was it was so much like the training we do in industry. They gave me a little booklet, a reference booklet, so I got all the information. And remember, both Michael and I talked about how information is a big part of the training. They gave me a card on how to evaluate avalanche risk. We give your workers in the workplace tools to help them with the process. And then what they did is told me a bunch of scary stories about how people had died during this activity, to engage my heart on it. So I thought, really good hazard recognition training, because it modeled what we do in industry. On the second day, now what they did is took us out to, I'm going to call it the workplace. So it took us out to Bow Summit in the Canadian Rockies to determine if the hazard recognition we learned in the classroom, if we could actually apply it in the workplace. Excellent, because Mike referred to that as the skill development. Take the knowledge, can we apply it in the workplace? So what we're doing in the center photo is we're cutting through the snow and we're measuring how deep the snow is and the layers and the coefficient of friction. And very quickly, we determined that this particular slope that we were examining had all the characteristics of a slope ready to avalanche. And the instructor asked us, said, how many people believe that slope over there is ready to avalanche? There's 14 of us in the group, and 14 people put their hand up. The hazard recognition training seemed to have worked. We all passed the competency test, the skill test. We took a safe route up, we hiked up the back, we went up the top of this slope. The slope is at an angle of, well, in the classroom they told us that avalanches most often happen between 35 and 40 degree slopes. The slope was 37 degrees. In that particular part of the Rockies, avalanches happen on a northeast facing slope. This is a northeast facing slope. They said avalanches will happen if there was a layer in the snow about 3 to 4 weeks previous. It had one of those layers. And as we look down the hill, all the trees are wiped out from previous avalanches. And the instructor again asked the question, how many people believe that slope's ready to avalanche? And 14 people put their hand up. Just like when you give the competency test after you're training your workers. And then the instructor asked another question. He said, how many of you would go down the slope anyway? 12 people put their hand up. 12 out of 14 people who got the hazard recognition part right and passed the competency test, 12 out of 14 said they would do it anyway. Does that happen on your work site? You see an incident in the workplace and you say, they had the training 2 weeks ago. Why did they do that? Or they just got out of the training on hazard recognition, or we read a safety alert on that hazard and they did it anyway. It's because we've been focused on hazard recognition training, not risk tolerance. So what we're going to do here today is focus on the risk tolerance. Why do your workers make those decisions? And why did these people make those decisions? And you look at the training you give. Is that what it looks like? Give people a book, tell them some scary stories about things that have happened, give them risk matrix tools. So we're doing the right thing on the hazard recognition, but we're not taking it far enough. And if your workplaces are like all the workplaces I've examined, your workers get hazard recognition. For this one up here, our hammer and the hammer wrench, they actually did a pre-job plan for that. A JSA, job safety analysis. What are the tools you use? Task hazard assessment. You've all got some kind of pre-job planning tool for those. So on this one, what the workers put the hazard down as, when we swing the hammer, it could bounce off the metal and hit the person's hand who's holding the wrench. They knew what the hazard was. And you know what the statement in the investigation said? As I swung the hammer, it bounced off the metal and hit my buddy's hand. Perfect, guys. You got it. This one up here on a rig. And on their tailboard meeting, what they addressed was the hazard is the extension on the wrench could slip off and hit somebody in the teeth. And what did the investigation say? As we pulled on the extension, the wrench broke and it hit me in the teeth. Perfect. This one, what they wrote on their JSA, the makeshift post pounder, so they identified it's not the right tool for the job, they just had a welder make it up. The makeshift post pounder could come off the top of the pole and crush somebody's hand on the way back down. And you tell me what the investigation said? Exactly that. Workers get hazard recognition, but they're making the wrong risk-based decisions on it. And on all three of these, what words do you think they put down as the mitigating action? What did they write on their JSA, THA, tailboard meeting? What did they write down?
Be more careful.
Be careful. And I would challenge you, every time you see that on a hazard assessment up front and the workers write down, be careful, you just think of those 12 people out on the slope who are saying, yeah, it's going to avalanche, but we'll just be careful. That's not hazard mitigation. That's saying we accept the risk. You know, there's tools for that. There's better ways of doing it. That's what they need to identify. Because when you see the words be careful, be cautious, be alert, stay focused, those aren't mitigating actions. That's saying we're going to go ahead and we'll just take our chances. So we don't want that happening in your workplace. So here's the 10 factors. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go through these 10 factors one at a time, show you how to recognize it in your workplace, and then give you some tips and tricks on what you can do about it in the workplace. You've got your personal action plan there, and from every one of these, I'm hoping you take away a personal action. Here's something you can do back on your work site tomorrow or Monday or whenever you get back there. Factor number one, and this is what our research told us, was factor number one is overestimating our physical capability and experience. As humans, we think we're much stronger, faster, and smarter than we actually are. And we've got little confirming voices in our heads that tell us so. So we buy into that. So this one is in two parts. First is overestimating physical capability. And we see it reflected in the quote, and I know you can't see it from the back. The quote up there says, I can lift 150 pounds in the gym, but you won't let me lift this on the workplace. I can do it. I've got the capability of doing it. So workers overestimating their physical capability. Why won't you let me lift that? I can do it. I'm young and I'm strong. This is usually a characteristic of younger, and this is a usual broad generalization, of younger male workers. Do you have any of those in your business? A few of them out there? So I want to tell the story here. This was an incident that happened because of this overestimating physical capability. So this worker, what he was doing, he took the spindle out of one of those big cables and he put it on his shoulder. He was moving it to another location. And as he's walking with it, he stepped on some ice, he slipped, and when he fell, the pipe came down, caught him on the base of the skull, fractured the base of his skull, and he was off for 5 months on lost time. I didn't get to meet this worker. It happened up at Curl, an Imperial site in northern Alberta. And I talked to our safety advisor on site and said, tell me something about this worker. And they said, we don't understand how this could happen to Chris. They said, Chris was young, he was powerful, he's 23 years old, we don't understand how this could happen to him. They said, Chris even works out in the gym in the camp every night. We don't understand how it can happen to him. And they asked Chris, they said, how heavy was that pipe? And he said, it was pretty heavy. He said, I think it was between 50 and 60 pounds. They actually measured the weight of the pipe. 196 pounds. So is Chris overestimating his physical capability? Yeah, seriously, and ended up with a very, very serious incident because of it. So young male workers tend to overestimate their physical capability. We see it in jobs, anywhere there's physical demanding. The rigs in Alberta, classic for young males overestimating their physical capability and hurting themselves because of it. Now the other part on physical capability, if you look sort of more like me rather than Chris, back in university I played a little bit of hockey, and do you think I relied on my superior build and strength to keep me out of trouble? And a little tip, I was 15 pounds lighter in university than I am now. So what did I rely on? Speed and agility. I was like the blue line ninja out there. And I kept myself out of trouble that way. So don't worry, you don't need a guardrail here. I've got I got the agility to do this. I can climb on equipment. I can climb up on the stuff and not hurt myself. In the middle of this research, near miss comes in from one of our operations in Norman Wells, Northwest Territories. Here's to quote the exact words off the near miss. As I stepped outside the office trailer, I stepped onto a patch of ice. My superior agility and cat-like reflexes kicked in, preventing certain death. A lesser man would have been killed. So is that a worker overestimating their capability? Don't worry about the tripping hazard. Don't worry about the step. Don't worry about the lube oil on the floor, the slipping hazard. I've got cat-like reflexes. So how do we address this one in the workplace? I go to that 21-year-old worker and say, you can't lift 75 kilograms. What's he going to say to me? Watch me. I'll show you 175. See, we've got young male workers in here. They know what the answer is, eh? So we don't challenge the ego of young males. What we say is, we acknowledge it is, yes, you are a specimen. And I wish I looked just like you, but on a Canfor site, on an Interfor site, on a Pinnacle site, we don't lift more than 50 pounds, or we put a special procedure in place, or we get tools to do it. So acknowledge the ability, and then say, but that's not how we do it on this site. But I do it like that all the time off the job. But that's not how we do it on this site. So acknowledge the ability. The second part of this is overestimating experience. And as I look around the room, and even sometimes when I look in the mirror, I see somebody who's probably not as strong and agile as they once were. But we don't get in trouble, right? Because we got smarts. We got experience. And we count on our years of driving experience, work experience, logging experience to keep us out of trouble. And that's where you see quotes like the second one up here. And what the second quote says is, I've driven in worse conditions like this and did just fine. So someone say, I know how this works. Now you know what's really distressing about the second quote up there? You know who said that? That's me. Big snowstorm in the mountains. And when there's a snowstorm in the mountains, you go snowshoeing, right? So I'm getting ready to leave. And my wife Ivy says to me, do you really think you should be going? And those are the words that came out of my mouth. I've driven in worse conditions than this and did just fine. You know, growing up in Canada, I've had 43 years driving experience, not like those ExxonMobil people from Houston who've never seen snow or Victoria. Sorry. And counting on my years of experience. Now, two things could have happened here. We could have got into a debate between Ivy and I, and whether it was safe or not, and we know who always wins those arguments, right? I didn't go that day, not because of that discussion. Remember my daughter Megan? This was right when she was learning to drive, and she's watching this discussion going on. And what message would I have sent to Megan if I had gone that day? Perfectly acceptable driving these conditions. Would she have got herself in trouble? Probably. And this is somebody I care deeply about, and I didn't want to send that message, so I didn't go that day, not because of the arguments and the justification is, I didn't want to be that role model for Megan. So those of you who have that experience, and those who have that experience in your organization say, I've done it like this for years. Yes, but would you teach somebody you cared for deeply to do it that way? Your son, your daughter, niece, nephew? And if the answer is no, then we shouldn't be doing it that way as well. So that's factor number one, overestimating capability and experience. Acknowledge the physical capability, but have standards on your work site for the physical activities. And for the people overestimating their experience, just put that question to them. Is that the way you would teach your son or daughter how to do this job? And if the answer is no, then that's not how we do it on this work site. Factor number two is familiarity with the task. Now, what our research told us here, and I'm going to explain it in terms of a safety guy, not in terms of the psychologists and cognitive researchers. What familiarity is convincing ourselves that you can't get hurt because I didn't get hurt the last time. And we do a repetitive job. We do it 10 times and we didn't get hurt. And what happens is you've got voices in your head. Now, this is not how the psychologist described it, but this is what I got. And you've got voices in your head saying you do it 10 times and you don't get hurt, and the voice says, good job. And you do it 50 times and you don't get hurt, and the voice in your head goes, good job. This is a safe job. And you do it 100 times, and now you start taking some shortcuts, and the voice in your head goes, oh, you're the man. You're doing it wrong, you're taking shortcuts, and you still got it done, and you didn't get hurt. And we convince ourselves you can't get hurt doing this. And then one day, some little change, and boom. The worker on the far left, this quote from the investigation, he'd done this about 500 times without hurting himself. And the first time he's opening that stiff valve, he'd put the wrench on it, say, got to make sure the wrench is seated all the way, and he'd stand off to the side, and he said, I need to pull with 80% force so I'm in control. And the 10th time he did it the same way. And after 50 times, he's probably standing in front. And the 499th time, he's in front. He's pulling with 120% force, and the wrench comes off right in the teeth. Because his brain told him, it was okay, you can't get hurt doing this. So any of these tasks that we do repetitively for long periods of time, our brain convinces us you can't get hurt. And we start accepting more and more risk in it. The one in the middle, another incident. He'd stacked about 200 of them when, and when they'd stacked the first couple of boards, it's, yeah, keep your hands out of these so you don't want your hands in the spaces between them. And 50 of them and 100 with them. And then what happens? Brain's convincing you can't get hurt doing this, not paying attention, eyes somewhere else rather than on your hands, and we have an incident. Just before retiring from Imperial last year, walked into an electrical substation, and electricity's always scared the crap out of me. And walking into the substation, I was going, bzzz, you know, all that humming. I said to the electrician, I said, doesn't that stuff scare you? He goes, nah, you get used to it. Is that a bad thing? Even though he's worked in this industry for 25 years and around electricity for 25 years, is it still as dangerous as it was 25 years ago? Yeah. So anytime you hear that coming from your workers or your own mouth, is that, oh, you get used to it? That's risk tolerance factor number 2, the familiarity, the complacency setting in. What do we do about this one? How do we bring ourselves back to that first time you did the job and the first day you did the job where you had that heightened awareness? How do we bring ourselves back there? Now there's some concepts called situational awareness, and there's techniques and you can teach yourself how to stay focused and not get distracted. But I got bad news for you. As humans, we are easily distracted and we can't maintain focus. So we can do a lot of training on it, but we will have these lapses. So we need something more than just telling people, stay focused. So a shortcut to this, I have a little tool in my pocket here. And this is the same tool that's on the bottom of your sheet. Little stop and think card. And what this is a really, really simple tool for bringing our brain back to the conscious mind and shutting up that little voice in the back of your head. So you're doing a task, you've stacked about 100 of these, and you pull out the stop and think card. And the first question on the stop and think card, what could go wrong? I can get my hand stuck between the boards. How bad could that be? We're 3 layers up now. That could probably crush my finger. Has anything changed? Yeah, it's getting pretty hot. The boards are wet. Probably a better chance of my hand slipping. Am I physically and mentally ready for this? And what these questions do is bring the brain back to the conscious level. And saying, okay, I need to keep my hands out of these spaces, need to make sure I'm not lifting with my back. So just a simple check-in process on that. So this stop and think process has huge power in its simplicity. I've seen workers use it where they'll just pull it out ad hoc. Just something doesn't feel right on the job and say, hang on, let's just do a stop and think moment here. And a worker leads it. So what are we trying to achieve here? Well, we're trying to stack the boards. What could go wrong? How bad could it be? Do we have the right tools and equipment? Has anything changed? And it's just that check-in coming back to the conscious. I've seen workers actually schedule it into their day, especially on rigs where they're doing the same thing over and over. We're going to run 300 joints of tubing. And what they'll do is say, okay, after we've run 100 joints, we're going to take 20 seconds and do a stop and think. Anything changed? Do we still know where everybody's hands are? Is there anything we need to be watching out for here? Bringing us back to that consciously competent state. There's some more advanced techniques you can use. I had the opportunity of meeting a laser eye surgeon in Calgary from the Gimbal Eye Center, Dr. Van Westenberg. There's one laser eye surgery they do, and it's got a 1 in 16 failure rate. So if you're going for laser eye surgery, you probably need to know which one that is. Dr. Van Westenberg, when I met him, had done 3,000 of these surgeries and never had a failure. And I got to talk to him, and he said what he does, the way he's been able to do that is he said every time he does that procedure, and whether he's doing it 8 or 10 times a day, every time he gets himself in the frame of mind that this is the first time I've done it. And other technique he used was verbalization. He talks his way through the procedure every time. So even though he's very, very experienced and done it 3,000 times, he said when he gets in there, what he does is he said, okay, I'm going to start this, whatever the name of the surgery was. I need to check the file to make sure if I've got left eye or right eye on this patient. Apparently that's pretty important too, I guess. And he says, okay, now I'm setting the laser for this. And this part of the procedure I need to be very careful with because this is the delicate part. And talks his way through it every time. And what our research identified is that when we verbalize, it brings all that information you've got in your subconscious and your workers have in their subconscious, it brings it back to the forefront. I don't know how it works. You'll need to talk to a behavioral expert on this. But verbalization helps us focus on the task and get us thinking about the task. You'll notice a lot of driving instructors use that, or driving testers, right? Tell me what you're doing. And what they're doing is getting you to verbalize so that you'll demonstrate the knowledge. So a great tool for that. So a couple of really simple tools. A stop and think process. And I really encourage the use of a card or verbalization. So that helps us with risk tolerance factor number 2, the complacency or familiarity with the task. Factor number 3, when we believe the outcome of our actions could be really serious and we could get seriously hurt, we have very low acceptance of risk. So this is a good thing. But once again, as humans, we often underestimate how serious the outcome could be. We don't think it could be quite that bad. And we complicate it in industry with some of the language we use. This hazard here, what do we traditionally refer to that hazard as? A pinch point. A pinch point. Have you ever been pinched? Been pinched lots of times. There was this one time I got pinched and it was kind of fun. But this is not fun. So you go to a 19-year-old worker and say, keep your hand out of the pinch point. Oh, pinch point. If that cable goes tight, what's going to happen to the fingers? Crushed or amputated. Let's call it what it is. It's a crush or amputation point. When we're using really big equipment, really big complex equipment, we take a lot of care with it. And you put a 19-year-old into one of these, it's just a skid steer. And do you know between BC and Alberta, every year for the last 10 years, there's been at least one worker killed by one of these. Not the big equipment, one of these. And they don't lock it out properly when they're working on it. Or they don't use the interlocks on it. And workers have been killed. It's just a skid steer. It can't be that serious. Or one in your industry right now. I think over the last few years it's getting the attention it needs. But it's just dust. It's just sawdust. Just sawdust? No, it's explosive. It's flammable. So really making sure workers that when we refer to this, and I love what I've seen on several other slides, you're referring to it as combustible dust, not sawdust, so people understand how serious it can be. And one I've had a major advocacy for the last 10 years is hot water. And you think about that worker, you saw a few slides back with the hot water like that. And it's just hot water, kind of like a bathtub or a jacuzzi. No, this is condensed steam, 99 degrees, 96 degrees Celsius. 3rd degree burns in 6 seconds. So do we really make sure we understand how serious it could be? So how do we get this message across? And once again, I refer to the stop and think process. First question on here is always, what could happen? What could go wrong? I could get sprayed with the hot water. How bad could it be? It's 96 degrees, which means 6 seconds to 3rd degree burns. How long do you think it would take you to get out of a wet set of coveralls? We actually did a test on it. 45 seconds. So 6 times, oh yeah, I'm going to be seriously burned. Has anything changed? Oh yeah, the fittings are getting loose. I'm starting to see some leaks on it. So just a check-in process on any one of these and asking that question, when you answer the part, how bad could it be? Really think, seriously, how bad could it be? Is this dust just a housekeeping issue? No, it's an explosive issue. So making sure workers understand that. Factor number 4, voluntary actions and being in control. When we do something voluntary or we feel we have control of it, the voice in our head tells us it's not risky. We're doing things voluntary because we enjoy doing them, and the voice in your head says, you wouldn't do this if it was dangerous, and we take on more risks. And the number at the top here, this was from Imperial Oil. Imperial Oil employees were 28 times more likely to be hurt off the job than on the job. Workers would do things off the job that they would never, ever do in the workplace. In the workplace, they would have fall arrest on when they did that. At home, when they're putting the Christmas lights up, they can do it with one foot and doing the ballet. Because we're doing it voluntary, we take more risks. And the voice in your head says, it'll be okay, it'll be fun. This especially happens in our recreational activities. This is my kayak, and that's my life jacket. I love going kayaking. You've probably heard me say it twice already today. I love going on the Bow River. It's one of my favorite spots. And people say, well, that's high risk. Do you think you could convince me to stop doing it? Probably not. But I need to know I'm taking more risks. And that's why in my life jacket pocket, I have a laminated stop and think card. So I'm paddling down the river, coming up to some rapids, and I take this out of my pocket and read it. Now, why do you think I do? Why do you think I take it out of my pocket? What did I have to do to take it out of my pocket? I had to stop. And a lot of times we say we're doing this stop and think process, and what's going on in your brain, you're going, yeah, I'm stopping and thinking, and your brain's going, blah, 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 blah. You got to physically stop to engage your brain. So I ground out the kayak, put down the tool, and pull it out of my pocket. What could go wrong? I could tip. But I've got cat-like reflexes. I can roll back up. And I hear language like that and going, whoa, risk tolerance factor there. How bad could it be? It's the Bow River, it's pretty cold, and what happens if I get separated from my boat? Okay, so I've got my equipment on and the emergency stuff in the life jacket. Has anything changed? This is a dam-controlled river. Is the water through here the same as it was last time? And it's usually when I get to the fourth question, am I physically and mentally ready for this task? You know, mentally, this will be a rush, going through these rapids and the whole works. And then the little voice in my head says, Dave, you're 58 years old. Last time you did the roll, you blew it and you hurt your shoulder, so maybe today you should go around rather than right through the center. So am I still going to go kayaking? Absolutely I am, absolutely. But I know I need to check in because I am taking more risks than I would with a workplace activity. How many people in the room engage in this activity? That was a bunch of you, eh? I don't do that. That's really dangerous, you know. So you say, how big is the motorcycle you have? Yeah, you. Unless somebody's got someone bigger.
750.
750? Has anybody got a bigger motorcycle than that? How big's yours? How much?
1690.
Like 1690 cc's?
Yeah.
My first vehicle only had 1100 cc's in it. But that has airbags and seat belts and stuff, right? No? So you take 1690 cc's of power, wedge it into your crotch, and go flying down the streets of BC. Is he nuts or what? Now, am I going to convince you not to do it? You're going to keep doing it, aren't you? But there's precautions you take. And I'm sure one of the precautions he takes is he has a stop and think card with his motorcycle helmet. And sorry, what's your name?
Glenn.
Glenn. And what Glenn does before he gets on his motorcycle, he takes a look at his stop and think card and says, what could go wrong? It's a motorcycle, I could get squashed. How bad could that be? No airbags or seat belts? Has anything changed? Gee, there could be gravel on some of these intersections. It dropped down below zero. Am I physically and mentally ready for this? Do I have the right tools and equipment? It's got the helmet, the leathers. And he'll go out, and just by going through the stop and think process, you can go out, do a fun activity, and it'll be safer. So I encourage you, if you don't have one of these, then I'll give you mine at the end of this presentation, okay? So, okay. Now, you probably laugh at my kayaking and Glenn's motorcycling, but what other kind of goofy, fun things do you do off the job? What do you do that some of us might think is risky? Any of you ride horses? Like that's pretty silly. Yeah, you do that, right? Like, do these animals understand English or anything? And you just what else? What other types? Any of you jump out of airplanes? Any of you done that?
Yeah.
And you did this voluntarily? Yeah, seriously.
Maybe it was pushed. I don't know.
Oh, okay. I wouldn't do that. But no matter what it is you're doing, is a simple stop and think process. You know, before you get on the horse, okay, am I physically and mentally ready for this? Is the horse physically and mentally ready for this? Do you wear a helmet when you ride? No. See, there's a lot more people doing that. You know, if it's a horse you're not familiar with, you're probably putting a helmet on is a good idea. So we can still do the fun stuff, but just with a little bit more caution around it. The other, story. Talking to a group of workers in Wainwright, Alberta a couple of months ago. So Wainwright, Alberta is kind of the hub of redneck Alberta. Sorry, is there anybody here from Wainwright? Okay. You guys are all from, you're not Wainwright, right? So, okay, so my Alberta buddies here. So, and I asked this question, is there anything that somebody in the room does that we might think is dangerous? And a bunch of people in the room start chuckling, and they're like, you need to talk to Chad. So Chad, what is it you do? Chad goes, I ride bulls. Well, you know what? Not even this one's going to help that. Horses, okay, but don't ride bulls. There's no hope for that. The other part of this is when we feel in control, we underestimate the risk. How many of you in the room feel safer when you have the steering wheel in your hand versus sitting in the passenger seat? Does that mean we're all better drivers than everybody else? What it means is when we feel in control, we underestimate the risk. So this situation here with our hammer wrench. Who's the more senior worker? Guy with the hammer. Who feels they have more control? Guy with the hammer. Who's making the decisions? Guy with the hammer. He just says, here, Junior, just hang on to this and go. Now, what if Junior said, okay, if it's safe, let's switch positions. And Senior's going to go, let's go get that holding device, the finger saver, before you swing the hammer. Or that day I was going out to the mountains. I said it's safe, you know, I've driven in worse conditions. And what if Ivy said to me, okay, if it's safe, I'm coming and I'm driving. Now, Ivy's a better driver than I am, but am I going to get a better assessment of the risk? Because I lost control. So a really good technique for bringing us back to the reality of the situation. Factor number 5, when we've had a personal experience with a serious outcome, we have very low acceptance of risk. So this is a good thing. But as your companies get safer, you're going to have a lot of workers out there who have never seen the serious one. You know, they've never seen a dust explosion. They've never seen someone get caught in some equipment. And they're skeptical about it. And we can show them a safety alert and tell them some news and something about to happen somewhere else. They need to hear the personal stories. So those of you who have the recollection of the personal stories, places where people have been hurt, let's make sure that 19-year-old and that 20-year-old worker know about those. We've got to keep the corporate memory alive. Every incident that we've ever had, there's got to be a lesson from it, and we've got to make sure that someone else doesn't do it. If you were to talk to anybody at Imperial Oil, anybody, you say, so that Dave Fennell that you used to work there, is there anything he's really freaky about? And they go, oh, he's a total freak on rotating equipment. Well, you know why I'm a freak on rotating equipment? Because over my career, I investigated 2 fatalities where people got caught in rotating equipment. This is a picture of reenactment. This is a winch. The winch wasn't working at the time. They were just rotating it. They were just adjusting the cable on it. It was rotating, but 1 revolution every 2 seconds. Raymond was walking by, putting his fall arrest harness on to do another job, and as he walked by, the strap of the fall arrest went over here, caught in the cable, and the driller just hears boom, boom, like this, and sees Raymond boots going through a space this big. So am I freaky about rotating equipment? You damn right I am. Because I've seen it. I've seen it happen. The other one, it was on the shaft on a power takeoff, the little shaft that sticks out the back end, this long, 1-inch diameter. And there was a little 1-inch keyway in it. And what we believe happened is the worker reached across the top, the seam of his coverall caught in that little keyway, wrapped him up, and his co-workers found him 45 minutes later, strangled by his own coveralls. That's how serious rotating equipment can be. And I know there's some companies a little bit averse to talking about serious things that have happened in the past. Your new workers need to know that. They need to hear the personal experience. So use this one where you have to. And let's make sure we keep the corporate memory alive. When we increase the cost of non-compliance, risk acceptance goes down. So this is a good thing, but you need to be there to observe it and to enforce it. And that's what WorkSafe does. And we're going to drive down the risk acceptance with fines and penalties. And you can use the same thing in your workplace for those things that are really, really important to you. I heard several of the speakers talk about the importance of isolation and lockout. If somebody screws with my isolation, you need to be taking serious action on that because they're endangering somebody else. So sometimes we can use the cost of non-compliance. Working at heights without fall protection, confined spaces. These are the things that have catastrophic when we don't get them right, so there should be serious penalties for non-compliance. Great example that I love is, put the highway example up here. In Alberta, on Highway 2, and you've driven on Highway, well, you guys have driven on Highway 2 in Alberta, right? It's kind of a straight, wide open highway. There's one little corner at Red Deer. And I was thinking, if I had a really, really fancy car and wind it out in that highway, the fine is something like $295. I thought it might just be worth it. You got this new car, you got the top down, it's a sunny day in Alberta, wind it out, get the wind blowing through your skin, and you get a $295 fine. You go, that was worth it. Now, how many of you have driven on the 401 in Toronto? That's a freaky highway, isn't it? It's kind of like Highway 2, except it's all jacked up on caffeine and steroids, and the drivers are all crazy in Toronto. So my apologies to anyone from Toronto. That's why you moved west, right? And that highway used to scare me. It was just so fast. But when I rent a car at the airport, I'd come out of Toronto Airport, and you put your 401 face on. You grab the steering wheel, and you go to the floor, and just get really aggressive out there. Now, 5 years I'm back there, come out of the airport in the rent-a-car, and there's a new sign up. And it says, if you're going more than 50 kilometers an hour over the speed limit, the fine is how much? $10,000. And they confiscate your vehicle, and they take your license. Am I going to speed on the 401? Probably not. Highway 2? Might take a chance on it. So those things that are really important to you, high cost of non-compliance. Let's make sure that workers understand this one's serious, and we would much rather have you disciplined, laid off, than dead. Use it selectively. It can be useful. Factor number 7 is overconfidence in the equipment. Now, what our research identified is a concept called risk homeostasis. And as humans, we are all prepared to accept a certain amount of risk. And we're always recalibrating how much risk is acceptable. And what happens is, if I give you a ladder that's twice as stable as any other ladder, this means you can do what? Climb twice as high? And that's what this process of risk homeostasis is. I give you a safer ladder to make sure you're safer, and the recalibration in your brain goes, oh, cool, twice as stable, I can go twice as high. And we've seen it over and over again. Things like anti-lock brakes. When anti-lock brakes were first introduced to the public, thousands and thousands of people with anti-locks were seen to drive significantly more aggressive than those with standard brakes. Why? Risk homeostasis. I've got anti-lock brakes. I can stop twice as fast. Therefore, I can drive twice as fast. Not the intent, but our brain does that. Now, who was the gentleman who jumped out of the airplane? That was you, right? Right here. Right. So you do know people have died during that activity, right? So they did a study in England 55 years ago, and how do you think people died parachuting?
Parachute failure.
So equipment failure. So what it was is you're doing it and you pull the ripcord and you go, oh crap, this is going to be a bad day, and then splat into the ground. Now, if you're still jumping out of airplanes today, the chute will open. The chutes are more advanced than they have ever been in history. Whether you pull the ripcord or on altitude or whatever the trigger is, the chute will open. They did a follow-up study, no change in the number of fatalities. But the cause has now changed. Instead of an equipment failure, now the cause is late deployment. I got the brand new chute. Get a few hundred more meters of free fall, and you pull it and splat into the ground with a partially open chute. That wasn't the intent of making them safer, but that's what people do. So if you're using one of the new ones, treat it the same way as if it wouldn't open before. They have limitations, okay? So, now the same thing happens in the workplace. You know, oh, we got brand new slings. Brand new slings never fail. No, we still don't walk under suspended loads. Or this one is high pressure piping. It's just been tested. We still don't stand over top of high pressure piping. And these ones here, open hook, unrated bungee cords never fail, right? Then how, well obviously they don't. People have confidence in the equipment because they hook them onto something and like a reverse slingshot, pull it right toward their teeth. I think they were invented by dentists. No, they fail. Don't stand in front of the thing. So workers need to know, yes, equipment will fail, and safer equipment doesn't mean we take more chances. The same thing happens with personal protective equipment. We overestimate the capability of the personal protective equipment we're using, and workers take more chances when they're overconfident in the protective equipment. 1989 in Imperial Oil. 1989, we had more burn injuries than any other time in our corporate history. 1989. What do you think we did in 1989? Full-time use of fire retardant coveralls. And we'd tell the worker, look at this stuff, it doesn't burn. Psst, you know, put the test to it and the whole works. And we'd have workers do things like go to one of these massive big boilers and open up the flame arrestor, put a burning rag on the end of a stick and turn the gas on. The thing would blow up and they go, oh, my coveralls didn't burn. Yeah, but you got no ears or eyebrows left now. You know, so they're overestimating. It's flash fireproof. It's not fire resistant. It's not impact resistant. It doesn't protect certain parts of your body. And the same thing happens with overconfidence in rescue. We can take a few extra chances here because the ambulance is just 4 minutes down the road and there's a fire department rescue team, and we take more chances when we believe we can be easily rescued. We went through some experience with these impact-resistant gloves at Imperial over the last five years. And the manufacturers tell me, my impact-resistant gloves will reduce hand injuries by 95%. So we put them on all the workers out there. Hand injuries went up. Because the workers were viewing these gloves as armor. Oh, look, and there's one glove that's called the Kong Super Gizzard Lizard. It's $95 a pair, something like that. And workers are putting their hands in spots they would never, ever put it with a regular glove because they got this protection. You're wearing that $95 super impact-resistant glove, and you're hanging onto that cable that you saw 3 slides back, and the cable goes tight. What happens to your fingers? Crushed and amputated. It's impact-resistant, not crush and amputation. So workers need to understand the limits. That the only thing a glove's going to do in a situation like that is be like a Ziploc baggie so you can hand all the pieces to the paramedic and you say, here's the sorry, that's too soon after lunch, right? So workers need to understand the limitations of the protective equipment. Vice President from Imperial once said this line at the bottom here: every job should be able to be done safely by a 65-year-old with a bad back. He knew something about human factors. And the second part of the sentence is, should be able to be done safely even if you're butt naked. Now picture that. No, don't do that. Don't do that. Now what he was saying that if you didn't have that protective equipment, if you were standing there butt naked, would you open that flame arrestor up and put a burning rag on the end of a stick and go, probably not? Well, don't do it because you have the coveralls on. Would you grab onto that cable with your bare hand? Most people say no. Don't do it because you have a glove on. So we need to understand the limitations of the personal protective equipment. Factor number 9 is when we can profit and gain from our actions. And this happens on an individual level, and it also happens on a corporate level. We take more chances when there's more to gain. And we see it every time the economy booms in the US, fatalities on the highway go up. We'll get one more load through, there's more money to be made, we're tired. And every time the price of oil booms in Alberta, fatalities on the rigs go up. Because we'll split our experienced crew and we'll get another rig out there, and we take more chances because there's more to be gained. So, and you know, Nick, the story you told, how old were you when that happened? 21. You'd probably make a really good impression on the company. Is there something to be gained there? Oh yeah, Nick's our go-to guy when there's troubleshooting. So there's probably something. And if we can keep the process going, the company's going to gain from it. And we take these extraordinary risks. There was a road build we were doing in Imperial a couple of years back, and our employees are coming to us. We had 2 different contractors doing it, and they said, the one contractor's just nuts, they're driving overloaded, and they blow through the stop signs. They're just crazy out there, driving over the speed limit. I said, what about the other contractor? No, everything's good there. They stop at the stop signs, don't overload, drive the speed limits. What was the difference? What do you think? How we were paying them. One contractor is being paid by the load. How do you get more money? You speed, you overload, you go through the stop signs. So sometimes we actually pay workers to take risks. I need to tell this story. This is a picture of a perforating gun. On September 9th, 1999, I was asked to investigate an incident involving a perforating gun. Now, those of you not familiar with the oil patch, when we drill a well, so we drill a well down through all that rock, we put a steel casing in place, cement it into place. Now we've got to get the oil out of the formation into the well bore. So a perforating gun is a device that's put down. It's got radial charges all the way around it. The charges are very similar to what's in the end of an anti-tank missile. It's meant to blow holes through steel. And it blows holes through the steel casing, through the cement, so the oil and gas flows in. Now, if you ever pull a live perforating gun out of the hole, what you're supposed to do is disarm electrically, take those wires off, and disarm ballistically, pull the blasting cap out. You fix whatever the problem is. Now, to rearm the gun, if you pull the blasting cap out, it has to go all the way back to Red Deer or Grand Prairie to get rearmed. And what we discovered in the investigation is blasters in the industry were getting paid by the shot. And blasters who were getting paid by the shot were making, 3 and 4 times as much money as those getting paid by the hour. Because what blasters getting paid by the shot would learn to do is they pull the live perforating gun out of the hole. They would disarm electrically, but leave the blasting cap in. Fix the problem, rerun a circuit test, rearm the gun, send it down the hole, and then get 3 to 4 times as many shots in a day. Well, on September 9th, 1999, when the blaster did that, when he went to run the circuit test on the surface, he connected the wrong wires. The blasting cap is still in the gun. He triggered the gun on the surface. He blew a hole this big right through my buddy Don's chest. Blew him off the face of this earth. We had paid people to take that risk. And some people said, oh, this is the blaster's fault. And sure, it was the blaster's fault. Some people even suggested this is Don's fault. Don shouldn't have been standing there. And you're absolutely right, Don shouldn't have been standing there. But the company, we had allowed a contract to be in place like that, that encouraged people to take risks. So this one's really, really important. We've got to get this right. So where we are paying people by the unit, by the load, you need to think, what mitigating actions do you have in place so something like this doesn't happen? And I know sometimes those contracts are essential, but what mitigating actions are in place? Don't let them stand alone, because people die when we do it. Factor number 10. Our role models impact how much risk we're going to take. So we're always looking to who our role models are in the workplace. So when we talk safety culture, if your role models don't have the safety culture you want, neither will the rest of the workers. So people are always looking to the role models. So let me bring you back out to Bow Summit, the snowshoeing. 14 people said the slope's ready to avalanche. 12 people said they would go down anyway. Let me tell you how it unfolded. Not all 12 people put their hands up at the same time. There was 2 people in that group, and in the classroom, these 2 guys were cool, they were young, they were charismatic, they were good looking, and by the end of the first day, they established themselves as the role models. They just exuded that whole thing. And by the end of the first day in the classroom, when people had questions, they stopped going to the instructors with the questions. They were asking one of these 2 guys who they had never ever met before, only known for a day. So very quickly, these 2 guys established themselves as the role models for good looks, charisma, whatever it was. They had no more knowledge than anybody else in the group. So we're out on the slope, and the instructor says, who would go down the slope anyway? Instantly, these 2 guys' hands are in the air. So now our role models are our risk takers. And I got to talk to them. It was the coolest experience ever. I said to the one guy, I said, why would you do that? And what he said to me, and here's how he said it to me, dude, when the avalanche happens, so not whether it was going to happen or not, he knows it's going to happen. Dude, when the avalanche happens, I'm going to scoot down the slope, do a wally over the lip, dart in behind the cliff, and whoosh, the avalanche will go right past me. Seriously. Which risk tolerance factor is that? Cat-like reflexes. He's going to outrun an avalanche. So he's got his own reasons for it. Turn to the other guy, border dude number 2. Why would you do the same type of thing? Dude, we've been through a day and a half of avalanche training. We're all wearing the locator beacons, and you guys all have the probes and shovels. I'm pretty sure you could dig me out. No, dude, I'm not digging you out. So these 2 guys, for their own reasons, say they will do it. 8 other people in the group aren't quite sure. So the 2 role models put their hands up. They're going to do it. 8 other people in the group go, sure. That's the impact your role models have. 8 people who weren't sure, convince them to do it. Now, we still have 2 people left over, don't we? First of all, a very important part of this story is Dave didn't put his hand up. Dave is a chicken when it comes to stuff like that, so Dave didn't put his hand up. So we got 2 people left over. I didn't get to talk to them, but I think they understood this whole risk tolerance stuff. They knew what the hazard was. The slope's going to avalanche. They perceived the risk they'll get buried under the snow, and the decision they wanted to make was not go down the hill. But now they've got a choice. The cool people and 8 other people have their hands up, and on the other side of the hill, you got Dave standing in his old wooden snowshoes. And they know that's the right decision. And you can see them going, that's right. That's cool, but not right. And going, And reluctantly, these 2 people put their hands up. So these role models impacted 8 people who weren't sure and were able to exert enough peer pressure on 2 people who were and convinced it. Do you know who your role models are in the workplace? And it's not always the supervisor. It's not always the safety person. And do you know if they're the risk takers? You need to know your work groups for that. And that comes down to some of that basic supervision stuff that Mike talked about. Do your supervisors have the ability to address those situations in the workplace? So those are your 10 influencing factors for risk tolerance. Back in your workplace, simple tools like the stop and think, cut it off the bottom of that card, send me a note, I'll send you some templates for it. Just teaching your workers how to ask that question. What could go wrong? How bad could it be? This simple process will address 7 out of those 10 risk tolerance factors in the workplace. The conversations, the safety conversations that Steve talked about. We need workers using this kind of language, talking the risk tolerance language when they have those conversations. When somebody says, no, we can get this done, it's safe, I've done it like this all the time. Oh, overestimating experiences. No problem. Let's get Billy to do it. He's 19. Okay, overestimating physical capability. Dave always does it that way. He's my hero. He's my role model. No, but he's a risk taker. Let's not do that. So opening up those conversations that Steve talked about, so important for addressing the risk tolerance. One more story. What we're trying to do is, through the research, we discovered that risk is inherent in all of us as humans. So what we did is put a little process out on the back of the Stop and Think card, and what we wanted was, it says, identify one risk that you knowingly take. And what I thought was, gee, if we could get each worker at Imperial to identify just one risk they knowingly take, and then underneath it says, I'm going to make a commitment to do something about that. One risk at a time, we'd make the company safer. So we hand this out to the workers. Now, I'm a pretty smart guy when it comes to safety, and I know if I hand a tool out like this, there's going to be some worker somewhere who says, so Dave, what did you write on the back of your card? You know, there's always a worker out like that, right? And I thought, well, I better have something ready, and I'm thinking, and I'm a safety guy. And then I thought, and what I wrote on the back of the card is, sometimes when I go snowshoeing, I don't understand the risk of the snow. And the commitment I made was to get the training at the university, and I followed through with it and came up with a really cool story besides. So even a safety guy admitted one risk. A couple of weeks later, I'm driving along, one hand on the steering wheel, one hand on the gear shift. And I think to myself, Self, you haven't driven a standard in 20 years, and you got a hand on the gear shift. Why? And again, I thought, wow, there's another one. And I took the card out again and wrote on it, the risk I take is there's times when I'm driving, this is either on the gear shift, the coffee cup, adjusting the radio, it's doing something. And the commitment I made is when I'm driving and find myself with my right hand doing something else, I say, Dave, 2 hands on the steering wheel. I say it out loud in the car. I do it when I'm by myself, and I do it when there's people in the car. Freaks them out completely. But what our research identified is risk acceptance is a human addiction. And we need to admit that we're risk takers. So, hello, my name's Dave, and I'm a risk taker. And so are all of you, and so are all of your workers in the BC forestry industry, and yes, even the New Zealand industry, because we've used this all over the world with ExxonMobil, and this risk tolerance applies everywhere. So we need to do something about it. I'm hoping on the back of on the action plan, that you've written down one thing that you're going to change in the workplace, or one thing that you're going to change in your personal life. This is just the tip of the risk tolerance iceberg. On each of these modules, there's more information, 20-minute safety meeting talks. It's the kind of thing we can teach your safety professionals how to deliver these other modules, so you can roll them out to all your workers at safety meetings. So there's lots of really good background where we've tried to capture the science. But in the meantime, you've got 2 tools in front of you that'll give you a really good start on the risk tolerance. You've got a template for a Stop and Think card on the back of that, on the bottom of that sheet, and you've got an action plan there. I encourage you to go back to your workplace and start looking for these factors in your workplace. Start creating those conversations and talking about risk tolerance. Because in the BC forestry industry and all the other industries here, if you're going to make your culture safer, we need to have these risk tolerance conversations. Remember, this is factor number 5 in those 5 I showed you this morning. We've got to get a handle on this. This will make you safer. Thanks very much.